In this video, I'm going to show you how to take a large men's shirt and turn it into an easy-to-sew women's peasant blouse, using this as my inspiration. This tutorial was inspired by viewers' comments and is designed specifically for beginners and people who don't have a lot of refashioning experience. For this project, you'll need, in addition to a men's shirt, a sewing machine, and basic sewing supplies, a 1/4 inch elastic for the neckline and the sleeves. I used about 60 inches, but your measurements may vary. So let's get started. First, we're going to cut out the neckline. Mark the shirt about an inch below the shoulder seams and just above the 3rd button. Make sure to draw a straight line across the button plackets because we're going to remove them later. Connect the marks with a curved line. To mark dark fabrics, I generally use a leftover scrap of soap, and for lighter fabrics, I use children's washable markers, but you can use whatever you prefer. Make a scoop in the back just big enough to go around the collar yoke, which is the section with the double layer of fabric. You want to make sure to remove the yoke as it will interfere with the drape of the gathers. If your shirt doesn't have a yoke, you can make the neckline any size you want. Cut the shirt along the marked line. Next, we're going to cut 2 strips from the bottom of the shirt, which will be used to create a casing, which is essentially a tube, for the elastic at the neckline. Make the first cut across the bottom just above the hem. Make the second cut 2.5 inches above the first. Then cut off the button plackets as well. Use the back of the shirt tail for the second strip. Measure 2.5 inches down and cut across, then square up the sides. Now we're going to remove the button plackets in the front. Cut along the sides as close to the plackets as possible. Next, we're going to mark where to cut the sleeves. Since I want short sleeves, I'm going to cut approximately 8 inches from the top, but if you want a 3/4 sleeve, cut it just above the button placket. Use the cut part of the sleeve as a pattern for the other side to keep both sleeves the same length. First, we're going to sew up the center of the shirt. Turn the shirt inside out and line up the 2 sides with the right sides facing each other. Line up the edge of the presser foot with the edge of the fabric and sew. Backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam to prevent the stitches from coming undone. I used a straight stitch with a 2.5 millimeter length. Then use a zigzag stitch to finish the seam and prevent the fabric from unraveling. Set the machine to a medium width zigzag stitch. Center the foot between the seam and the edge of the fabric and sew. I'm using white thread so you can see what I'm doing, but in general I try to use thread which matches the color of the shirt. That way, if your seams are a little uneven, they'll be less noticeable. Pin the seam to one side to keep it flat and facing in the same direction so it doesn't get twisted. Sewing the casing is going to be the most complicated part of this project, so let's do that next. Place the 2 sections of the casing together with the right sides facing each other. Sew with a straight stitch and the edge of the presser foot lined up with the edge of the fabric and backstitched at the beginning and the end to fasten the seam. Then finger press the seam open. Now we're going to attach the casing to the neckline. Fold up the short edge of the casing a 1/2 inch or so and finger press so it keeps its shape. Starting at the back of the shirt, pin the casing all the way around the neckline on the inside of the shirt, with the right sides of the casing facing the wrong side of the shirt. When you get back to the starting point, fold the edge of the casing so it's even with the other side. Pin into place and trim the excess. Sew the casing to the neck of the shirt, lining up the edge of the fabric with the edge of the foot all the way around. When you get to the beginning of the seam, backstitch to fasten it. Now comes the tricky part. You always want to keep your seams flat when you're sewing, and ironing can help with that. So first we're going to iron the seam we just sewed so it's nice and flat. Then fold the casing 1/4 inch from the edge and iron it in place all the way around the neckline. Next, fold the casing over so that the ironed edge covers the seam by about 1/8 inch. Don't just fold it up to the seam, make sure it goes over the seam, then pin into place. And continue all the way around the neckline. Sew along the edge of the ironed fold on the right side of the fabric all the way around the neckline. Sew as close to the fold as you can without going off the fabric. You can line up the fold to the center of the toe of the foot as a guide if it helps. This is the most difficult seam to sew in this project, so take your time. Continue sewing until you reach the starting point and sew over the existing seam, then fasten it by backstitching. It should be one long continuous seam all the way around. Don't worry if the seam isn't perfect, the gathers will hide a lot. Use a safety pin to thread the elastic through the casing until it comes out the other side. Try on the shirt and adjust the elastic until you're happy with the size of the neckline. Then hold into place with a safety pin. Mark where the two edges meet, give yourself 1 inch overlap on each side, and trim the ends. Overlap the pieces of elastic and sew them together using a zigzag stitch, then backstitch to secure. I find the elastic to be quite disobedient, so do the best you can and then trim the ends. Next, we're going to sew the hem for the sleeves, which will also serve as the casing for the elastic, so let's go back to the ironing board. Fold up the edge of the sleeve 1/4 inch and iron into place. Now fold that edge up 1/2 inch and iron into place all the way around the sleeve, then repeat on the other side. You don't have to be super exact here, just as long as you leave enough room for the seam and for the safety pin to go through. Sew close to the fold around the sleeve, but leave a 1 inch gap to insert the elastic. Use a safety pin to thread the elastic through the casing until it comes out the other side. Try the shirt on and adjust the elastic until you're happy with the size of the sleeve, then hold in place with the safety pin. For reference, mine was about 15 inches long. Mark where the two ends meet, give yourself 1 inch overlap on each side and trim the ends. Overlap the two ends and sew them together using a zigzag stitch, then backstitch to secure the elastic. To sew up the gap, start on the existing seam, then backstitch to secure, sew across the opening, then sew to the other side of the seam and backstitch again. Then repeat the process with the other sleeve. For the hem of the shirt, fold the fabric 1/4 inch or so from the edge and iron. Then fold over again and iron again. Sew close to the folded edge all the way around the shirt. I switched to a black thread here because I wanted the hem to blend in. So that's it, you're done. Unless you're me, then you decide the neck casing would look nice with a second row of stitches along the top. So I took out the elastic, made a row of stitches close to the fold of the casing, put the elastic back in, and voila! Now I'm done. And here's the result. The men's shirt I used was a size large, and my top turned out close to a women's size small. So if you want a larger top, it's a good idea to start with a bigger shirt. That way you'll have more fabric to work with. I tried to make this tutorial easy to follow, especially for those of you who might be new to sewing or refashioning, so I hope it was helpful. and that it inspires you to try your own refashioning project. Thanks for watching, and happy upcycling!